Due south of the geographic center of America is a rural community called Hutchinson, Kansas. To travel its streets today is to be reminded of a simpler time where neighbors look out for each other. The shops and restaurants along Main Street work symbiotically with the local industries to keep everyone clothed, fed, and entertained. And at night, a blanket of stars closes each day with a gentle reminder that there are still places we can all call home. But when you take a second look, high above the tree lines, you'll notice something unexpected breaking the blue of a perfect summer sky, immediately letting you know there's something different about Hutch, something out of this world, in this world. It's called the Cosmosphere. It's a museum, an education center, a research and development facility, and it is a window into our past that may hold the keys to our future's most impactful decisions and significant innovations. From its humble beginnings in the early 1960s as a local planetarium, to its remarkable evolution over the decades to become an internationally renowned icon of the true potential of human beings. To grasp the enormity of all that the Cosmosphere represents and offers, it's important to start where it began, right here, in the middle of America, with a single idea inspired by the stars.
It started with a wonderful woman named Cary. Patty grew up in Oklahoma, and I asked her one day, I said, Patty, what implemented your love of the stars? And she said, well, growing up in Oklahoma, it's about all you do is look up at the stars. And she said her dad would take her out at night and they'd look up at the stars, and he would tell her some of the constellations. And that developed her love for the stars. She wasn't one to just sit and let things happen. She made them happen. She had goals and dreams and stars in her eyes. And she wanted to build a planetarium for Hutchinson, Kansas. Well, the first planetarium she raised money for was in the chicken coop or the poultry building at the Kansas State Fairgrounds, about 15 blocks from here. And they had just built the poultry building, and so the chickens weren't cackling or laying eggs yet. So she thought, this'll work. So she got a starball projector and put it there, rented folding chairs for the public. She charged 50 cents for adults, 25 cents for children, and if you were 6 or under, no admittance. She wanted peace and quiet, but she was marvelous, and she got a group of volunteers here in Hutchinson to assist her in giving star shows. And on December 2nd, 1962, the planetarium opened in the chicken building at the fairgrounds, and the show was Star of Bethlehem.
The middle of the country already had somewhat more of a connection with space because every night, compared to the big cities, they could look up and see the glories of the Milky Way. They could see amazing vistas of stars. They could see all kinds of satellites coming over, little dots of light that she knew were made by people, Russians and Americans. Eventually, by the time you get to 1961, you're looking at people flying in space. You're looking at Yuri Gagarin, the first person in space, flying over. You're looking at Alan Shepard, America's very not short behind. They're also flying people in space. So all of a sudden, it's possible to go out into those Kansas skies and look up and see people flying over. It was a time of immense change. And with only 15 minutes of human spaceflight experience, President Kennedy said the country was going to go to the moon by the end of the decade, something that was impossible. It was science fiction. And yet it happened.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
And ever since then, we have been changing things and making it happen. We tend to think of those big changes as being enormous places in the big cities on the coasts of the country with millions of dollars behind them. But inspiration is way more important. It doesn't matter what the funding is if you can excite people. Look at somebody like Patty in the middle of the country at that time, looking up at probably the best night skies you could see anywhere. And she not only got the excitement of the technology, she got the heart, she got the poetry of why this mattered.
In 1962, a woman in the Bible Belt, in a very rural area, introducing STEM education before STEM education was cool. It was just what was needed at just the right time. So in that sense, she was the perfect disruptor. When Patty Cary presented the idea, the way she described it was, I wanted there to be an alternative to FFA, which for those who don't know is for Future Farmers of America, which at one time, I'm sure in 1962, was the going group for particularly young men. There was FHA for Future Homemakers of America for young women. And so the idea that, first of all, astronomy, this was the first planetarium in the state of Kansas, could be introduced, that somebody outside the school system could do it, that someone could do it with volunteers, a used stargazer projector, and rented folding chairs. All of that was a huge step out from the norm. And yet, Patty Cary did it with this fierce graciousness, and she had this grace about her that just made you want to listen. And then once you listened, you realized that she had ideas that were really important to bring people together.
Well, Patty's mind was always thinking more and further. And I believe that her desire to educate and to help people learn was always in her mind. And she hired several different people to work in the planetarium. The volunteers did a good job, but the educated did a little bit better. And she was able to connect with Max Airy, who was working in the planetarium at the time, and together they did share the desire to acquire artifacts. The first item here was the Mercury spacecraft. And of course, there were 6 Mercury launches from 1961 to 63, and one person at a time. I was gonna say man, but it's true, at that time they didn't allow women in the space program. But it just grew, and from Mercury they went to Gemini and then to Apollo, and if you go through the Museum of the Cosmosphere, you see it all.
One of the things about Mrs. Cary, when she was getting people to help with this project of hers, she touched everybody in church and in all of her clubs and things, and that's how I got involved in it. She was asking people to come and either answer the phone or greet people or do things of that nature. And she said, "Will you do a phone?" And I said, "No, I hate talking on the phone." And so she thought about it a little bit, and she said, "Would you like to give some tours?" And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about the space program," simply because as an ordinary person, I listen to the TV and listen to the radio. We're going to go to the moon. Okay, all right, we're going to go in space. That's fine, that's all I knew. And she said, "Well, I'll get you some books," and she did. When we started our tours as docents, we went downstairs, and the place was a mess because they had all the lumber and everything. and the Mercury was just sitting there all covered with plastic. And so you'd take people down and caution them to be careful, and then you'd lift up the plastic and tell them all that you knew about the Mercury space capsule.
I had an aunt who lived in Hutchinson, Kansas, who, when I was very young, would always talk about the Cosmosphere. The fact that you've got to come see the Cosmosphere. Was very interested in space and science, was obsessed with the space shuttle, was obsessed with the Apollo program, obsessed with sci-fi. And my aunt in Hutchinson kept saying, we got to come to the Cosmosphere. You got to, when you're old enough, we'll send you to the space camp. So when I was in middle school, ended up going to the space camp for a couple of years, ended up working there when I was in college as a camp counselor. And then after college, got into comedy and working in film and television and communications. And then ultimately ended up working at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in space and science communication. But throughout those years, the roads really converged with a lot that I learned at the Cosmosphere. I guess when thinking about the Cosmosphere, I think of inspiration and empowerment, that no matter who you are or what you're working on, if you go to a place like the Cosmosphere, you're going to be inspired, but you're also going to be empowered to work towards what you want. You can see that there are these space artifacts that people built that took people to the actual moon, and then they came back, and those are right there. You can walk down the hall and see the Apollo 13 Odyssey that went to the moon and came back. What you see there is something that was once a theory and is now history, then will become a lesson to be learned.
The Cosmosphere houses the largest international collection of space artifacts anywhere in the world. And that didn't happen by chance. It was planned out and then executed over a period of years. Cosmosphere received thousands of artifacts in the late 70s. At that time, the Apollo program had come to an end, and literally there were thousands of warehouses across the United States with NASA hardware looking to dispose of that hardware. The Cosmosphere, working with NASA and the National Air and Space Museum, became the recipient of those artifacts. And even though we didn't have a facility at that time, NASA and the Smithsonian entrusted the Cosmosphere, this fledgling operation without a building, with all these artifacts. So in 1980, when we opened up as the Kansas Cosmosphere and Discovery Center, we opened up our museum that included all of these artifacts, and almost overnight allowed the Cosmosphere to tell the story of the American side of the space race. Over the years, as we grew and expanded, we also grew our collection and deliberately wanted to begin undertaking a project to tell the story of the space race from both sides. As we grew our American collection to house Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, we also began to acquire artifacts from the former Soviet Union. And in '97, we opened up the expansion which we're standing in today. And as a part of that, we were able to acquire an SR-71 Blackbird, which I'm standing underneath. And we trucked this Blackbird down 11th Street, set it on its pedestal, and literally built this building around it. What it also did was it provided us with the necessary exhibit space to begin showcasing our Soviet artifacts. And we grew and developed our exhibit program. And today are the only museum in the entire world that tells the story of the space race from a point-counterpoint basis. Our visitors who come to the Cosmosphere are immersed in an environment of the space race. We start out with the V2, the inception of the first ICBM during World War II, and then we walk visitors through a chronological story of how the Soviets and the US were challenging each other to become the first to land on the moon.
The achievements in space are one of the most inspiring things that humans have ever done in our entire history. They represent the cumulative work of thousands upon thousands of individuals, the passions of people who knew that they would be nameless in the efforts that they were putting in. And these museums matter because they show us who and what we can be when we are at our best as a species. When I come here, the Cosmosphere makes me feel like I want to be a better version of myself every single day that I'm here, more than any other place that I've ever been on this earth. And that's because of the stories that we tell here and what they show about what people were willing to risk and sacrifice, the astronauts, the ground crew, the engineers, in order to accomplish these feats of science and engineering.
So I did not know what to expect when I first went to the Kansas Cosmosphere. I was going out there for a book signing with an Apollo astronaut. It felt like a wonderful thing to be going to do. We ended up a couple of hours later on the wing of a space shuttle giving a speech to these people below. It was very, very surreal in the way that the space artifacts were actually part of the texture of where I was giving a talk. As well as giving talks there, I had time to go around the museum and see the incredible exhibitions, and I felt like this is somewhere that tells a story better than I've ever seen anywhere do it. Even more exciting personally for me was to go behind the scenes where they were working on revising things, building things, renovating things. A bunch of old spacecraft that needed work were being worked on, and they were doing it in a way I'd never seen before. They were finding old bits of spacecraft that had been scattered to the winds, bringing them back, putting them back in the right place. They were doing a proper historical job on respecting these things, making sure that they were done back in a very, very good way. They were going to last for centuries and centuries accurately. And it really moved me. It made me realize this is the gold standard the rest of the world needs to follow.
We're sitting in one of my favorite artifacts in the entire facility, and that is the historic Apollo-era White Room. The White Room, in my opinion, represents all of the emotions that played out in preparation for launch of the mighty Saturn V. The astronauts took the elevator up the tower, came across the gantry through this door that's in front of me. And it was in this very room that the astronauts did their final suit checkouts, make sure that everything was functioning properly with their pressure garments. The spacecraft was checked out, make sure everything was properly functioning inside the spacecraft, the Apollo Command Module. And it was where the astronauts said their goodbyes. It was the people who worked in this room. This was their office. And these were the last people that the astronauts saw before they went on their journey to the moon. We're down here in the lower level of the Cosmosphere in one of my favorite areas, the Cosmosphere's curatorial department or collection storage. With over 10,000 artifacts in our collection, most are stored here in this area. In this area, we've got mission reports, diagrams of spacecraft, blueprints of spacesuits, a lot of original documentation regarding the early manned exploration of space. And when we come back over here, this is probably one of my favorite parts of the entire curatorial area. This is an area we refer to as the morgue, where we store the bulk of our spacesuits. And up here, one of my favorite pieces. This is an Apollo-era A7L IVCL, which was the intervehicular cover layer. This was a trainer used by Deke Slayton in preparation for his Apollo-Soyuz mission, the Apollo-Soyuz, which was the end of the Apollo program. We also have other suits in storage, Apollo-era suit. We've got a US Gemini G4C spacesuit, some space helmets. Let's go look at some of the artifacts our curators are working on. So Shannon, every time I'm down here, I just am amazed with the artifacts that are in our collection. The stories that our artifacts tell, the human stories. Did you know that our Liberty Bell, bottom of the ocean, where it resided for 38 years, was the spacecraft that the Cosmosphere wanted for its collection. The Cosmosphere was instrumental in the discovery, recovery, and conservation of it, and it resides here today. Well, Shannon, I know about this knife.
Well, I know it's your favorite, so please put on some gloves and tell me what you like about it.
I never thought you'd ask. Well, as I'm putting the gloves on, this is a Randall knife. And the knife was given to each one of the original 7 astronauts for multiple reasons. One was obviously survival. If you can feel it, you can feel how heavy and durable the knife is. So in the event the spacecraft went off course, they could use the knife for survival, so cutting sticks, creating shelter, hunting, things of that nature. The other reason it was given was because this would have been used if the astronaut was trapped inside of the capsule. They could literally cut their way out of the top of the capsule using this knife to escape. So a very important artifact. This was Gus Grissom's. Liberty Bell 7, as you know, resides here in our collection. But during the course of the restoration, Spaceworks found this in the debris, you know, the tub of debris outside of your area. This was in that debris when they did the restoration. So an incredible knife, an incredible piece for our collection.
And then we have the Lunosphere, which is a really cool Soviet artifact. We often call it the cosmic calling card. The Soviets wanted to make it to the moon first so badly that on an unmanned mission, they sent a Lunosphere, much like this one.
So Khrushchev would have done this out of spite?
Out of spite, yes. So once it landed on the moon, it would, there's a small explosive inside and it would explode. All these little pieces would go everywhere. And then no matter who made it to the moon first, they would find that the Soviets
So
had.
maybe 100 meters square. So Khrushchev literally thought if the Americans beat the Russians to the moon, they would land in this spot and find these medallions.
Right.
So a lot of time, money, and effort spent on nothing.
On spite.
But it's a beautiful artifact.
It is very cool.
So Shannon, this blast artifact, again, one of my favorites.
One of your favorites, I know.
Could you shift it ever so slightly so I could get a better look? So this is the Earth path indicator from our Liberty Bell 7. So this would have been in the cockpit. I'd like to call this the first GPS. That globe that you see, that allowed the astronaut, the pilot, to understand where they were at. So in Grissom's case, a 15-minute suborbital flight, it would have indicated where he was going up and going down. Now, had he orbited, you would have been able to track your orbit around the Earth using that globe. So an incredibly crude piece of equipment, but a very, very important piece for the astronauts. Again, a wonderful piece for our collection, a great human story, and it shows you how far technology has come today.
And it's amazing how well it survived.
Especially given that it was at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean for 38 years. It's in great condition, which is a testament to our Spaceworks division.
Oftentimes when I'm out talking to people about the Cosmosphere and sharing our story, and I have to start out with a full-on description. We are an international science education center and space museum located in Hutchinson, Kansas. Sometimes I'm in places where I have to explain the Kansas part. Always I have to explain where is Hutchinson. So if you were in Kansas City, I'm saying, well, you head to Denver and you turn left at Salina. So there's that. There's the geographical challenge of being in a town with a trade area of 60,000 people with the nearest airport 50 minutes away. And then there's the challenge of the mindset of, well, that's a long ways from anywhere. So those are obstacles. They're also opportunities because people who come here, again, from all over the world and every state in the United States, every year, they come to Hutchinson like pilgrims. So they plan to come here, which means we bring so much to South Central Kansas from all over the world. They stay, they get to know the story. So as compared to a museum maybe in Chicago or Washington, D.C., where you're gonna see a bunch in a day, you come to the Cosmosphere for a Cosmosphere experience, and I think that's phenomenal.
Absolutely, there is a sense of pride having it here. I mean, it's pretty inspirational already just to think of the fact that all of this was started just by one woman who had a dream. So it's pretty crazy to think about the fact that even though we're just in a small town like this, we have such a big thing that is a top wonder in Kansas. And not only that, but there's nothing else like it. So there is a whole lot of pride around that, because why in Hutchinson, Kansas would you have a space museum anyways? So it's fun when a lot of people ask that question and we get to explain it and tell the whole story about us.
We talk about that a lot, like how we're in Hutchinson and there's so much local pride for it. Definitely. But I don't know. Why not? Why shouldn't it be here? Oh, I know. The first time I came around the curve, or, you know, kind of came up, and there's no hills. I can't think of the barriers that I saw, and then when I came up and saw the rockets outside, I mean, there's nothing like it. Especially, I think I read an article, we did the 60th anniversary exhibit, and someone put in an article that those rockets changed the skyline forever of Hutchinson. I mean, forever, kind of. Nothing's forever, but such a significant visual of us. But yeah, I know. I don't know. Why here? Why not here? Why not?
The Cosmosphere has the duty to continue to tell the story, because honestly, we're at the start of a new space race. Similar to where we were in 1961 when two competing countries were going back and forth trying to achieve firsts. We're now seeing that play out in the private sector. And so it's important that while we tell the past, we position ourselves to tell the story of the future and to inspire those next generations, to again position the Cosmosphere to be the only place in the world that tells the complete story of space exploration. 60 years ago, Cary had the vision to start the planetarium here in Hutchinson. And over those 60 years, we've been able to continue to grow and develop the Cosmosphere. Today, the Cosmosphere is one of the foremost space museums and education centers in the world. And for me, when I come here and walk through those front doors every day, I know I'm part of preserving the past, but I'm also part of inspiring the future. And for me, that's what is exciting. That's why I'm here, is to be able to put the Cosmosphere in a position to continue to grow, but more importantly, to continue Patty's dream.
The first time I went to the Cosmosphere was with Apollo 15 astronaut Al Wood, and we'd written a book, Falling to Earth, and we were going out on a book signing as part of the tour.
Viewing a wonderful space museum.
And I think there was a lot in this book that really resonates with what is special about the Cosmosphere, because it's not just about the technology, it's not just about the science, it's about the soul, it's about the heart of humanity and why we go into space. So we finished the book, by Al, a Michigan farm boy, and tried to get something that very much mirrors why the Cosmosphere is an amazing place. We finished the book this way. Sometimes while I sit and enjoy the good company of my family, the moon will slowly rise above the trees. I generally don't pay it much thought, but occasionally I'm reminded of my brief glimpse into infinity while alone on the moon's far side. I still have lingering questions about what I experienced. The answers won't come in my lifetime, that will be your job. Try it sometime. Someday all of us who journey to the moon will be gone. Take a walk on a summer night, look up at the moon and think of us. A part of us is still there and always will be. And I think that's something that really reflects why the Cosmosphere is important. It's in the middle of nowhere, as most people would see it, and yet you get there and all of a sudden you see these space rockets rise out of the horizon and you go, this is an incredible place. I already know this is going to be an exciting experience. And it does what we say in the book. You get the feeling, not just the learning about the science, learning about the technology, you get the feeling of why space is important for humanity's journey.